The forbidden-looked chamber was filled with silent tension. As dozens of alien delegates observed the arrival of the human envoy from Earth, his name was Jack, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen too much and said too little. His eyes scanned the room not in arrogance, but in curiosity. And as he took his place at the center of the Galactic Unity Summit, a stir rippled across one side of the chamber, where the Virellan representatives stood tall, regal, and emotionless like living sculptures. Carved from violet crystal among them stood Sylphie, younger than the rest, with a silver crest flowing down her head and eyes like liquid sapphire. She had been trained since childhood to suppress all urges, all instincts, all distractions for the sake of pure logic. But the moment she laid eyes on Jack, her breath caught in her throat, her chest tightened, and a strange heat crept through her veins. She staggered one step back, her hand reaching to the edge of the bench. As her vision blurred, the room tilted for her, like she had been thrown into another gravity field. Jack noticed her faltering, and his brow furrowed in concern. But before he could move, several Virellan elders surrounded Sylphie, their voices low and sharp as they tried to escort her out without attracting attention. But it was too late. The other delegates were already murmuring, noticing the change in her posture, the sheen of sweat forming at her temples, the way her eyes locked on Jack like he had reached inside her mind and pulled something ancient and wild from the depths of her DNA. Sylphie tried to speak, but the words came out as soft gasps, her body trembling uncontrollably. The lead elder placed a hand on her back and whispered in Virellan tongue, but Sylphie jerked away and turned toward Jack again. Something in her was changing, not just emotionally, but biologically, and she didn't understand it. Her race had always been above such primitive behaviors. They believed themselves far evolved from heat cycles or bonding responses, but what she felt right now was undeniable. Her core burned with a longing she had never studied or even heard of. Jack stepped forward slowly, unsure of what to do. His instincts told him to help, but the guards surrounding Sylphie raised their weapons not at him, but at her, as if she had become a threat. The elder turned to the council and announced that a medical emergency had occurred and that Sylphie would be removed immediately for her safety and others. Jack stood still, watching her being dragged away, her eyes locked on his, until the chamber doors closed. Moments later, in the observation hall, whispers broke into arguments. Scientists and strategists from multiple species reviewed footage of Sylphie's breakdown. The initial scans showed a surge of neural activity and a massive hormonal spike, but what disturbed them most was the genetic signature. Her reaction wasn't random, it was triggered by human presence, and the pattern was clear as they replayed the footage again and again. Her vital signs only spiked when her gaze met Jack's. No one had ever documented such a case, because no one had ever imagined such a thing was possible. The Virellan were supposed to be emotionally sterile, evolved, and untouchable, yet Sylphie had responded to a single look from a human male with overwhelming heat and desire, a physiological override. Her own body could not resist. In a silent chamber far away, Sylphie sat alone, her skin glowing faintly, her breathing shallow, her thoughts racing. She could still see his face burned into her mind, and she whispered to herself, without understanding why, "What are you, Jack? What are humans?" Trollians, somewhere deep in the archives of an ancient species, a forgotten warning pulsed back to life, triggered by a connection thought to be extinct. Reaction spreads. The Galactic Council had never seen such panic rip through its ranks so quickly. Every security feed was rewound, every scientific team mobilized as the footage of Sylphie's breakdown played over and over again. She had not only lost control, she had been completely overtaken by something ancient, something primal that no Virellan had experienced in recorded history. She remained in isolation now, her room sealed by layers of energy fields, guarded by both her own kind and council sentries. But the real shock came when the same symptoms began to surface in other Virellan females, one by one, quietly, without warning. A young Virellan officer assigned to the summit's medical bay collapsed when she passed by a human technician, her pulse racing, her body temperature spiking, her thoughts flooded with images she could not explain. Another female researcher working on diplomatic algorithms became unresponsive the moment Jack's face flashed on her screen. They ran the tests again and again, and the results were always the same. Their bodies reacted to the sight of a human male with what could only be described as an evolutionary imprint. Back in her isolation, Sylphie sat on the cold floor, her back against the wall, her fingers clutching the edge of her robe. She could still feel the way her blood had rushed the moment she saw Jack. His presence had pulled something from her that she had never been trained to control. Her mind kept returning to his eyes, to the calmness in his face, to the warmth that had risen in her chest when he looked at her, not as a subject, not as a threat, but as someone real. She had never felt real before. Elders debated in secret chambers, Some demanded immediate evacuation of all Virellan members from the summit. Others wanted to quarantine all humans present. Some even suggested terminating Sylphie before the anomaly spread further, but nothing could stop it. The reaction was not just emotional. It was biological, buried deep in the genetic memory of the Virellan race. As night fell over the diplomatic tower, Sylphie made her move. Her breathing controlled her steps. Silent, her instincts sharper than ever, she bypassed guards, using the very training designed to suppress emotions now fueled by them. She navigated through corridors past alien diplomats, and finally reached the observation dome where Jack stood, alone staring out at the stars. He heard her footsteps and turned slowly, his eyes soft. Not afraid, just surprised. Sylphie stepped closer, her voice low, trembling, but clear. She told him that something in her had changed, and she did not know if it could be undone. She said that her people were afraid not of him, but of what he represented, something they had buried for generations, and now that he was here, they could no longer hide from it. Jack listened quietly. He did not back away. He did not speak over her. He simply asked her what she wanted. Sylphie said she wanted answers. She wanted to understand why she felt like she belonged when he looked at her, and why her body only calmed when he was near. They stood there for a long moment, two souls from different worlds drawn together by forces neither fully understood. The alarms had not sounded yet. The council had not noticed her escape, but the storm was coming, and deep down Sylphie knew that running to Jack might have saved her life or doomed both their worlds forever. Hunted by her own kin, the halls of the galactic summit turned cold as word spread that Sylphie had vanished from her isolation chamber. And though no alarms had been triggered, the Virellan Command Council already knew where she had gone. Her bond was not one they could sever with orders or sedation. It was living, growing, something older than their laws and stronger than their science. She had gone to find the human, the one whose presence had pulled her soul out of hiding. Jack stood beside the wide window of the summit observatory, the stars drifting beyond the glass like silent watchers. He felt her presence before she even entered. Her footsteps were softer than any guards, her breath held as if the silence between them was more sacred than speech. She came close enough to reach out her hand, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of defiance and desperation. She said she did not know what she was becoming, but she could not go back, not now, not ever. Jack looked at her closely, and there was no fear in his expression, only curiosity and something deeper, a protective calm that wrapped around her like warmth in deep space. Sylphie stepped closer, and without knowing why, her hand touched his, and for a moment her entire body stopped trembling. The chaotic surges within her fell into rhythm. Her mind cleared, and the fire in her blood eased, but the moment shattered when a sharp voice echoed through the walls. The Virellan retrieval unit had arrived. Their boots stormed the corridor, their weapons drawn not to stun, but to erase, to silence the anomaly before it spread further. Sylphie's eyes widened in horror, and Jack immediately stepped between her and the approaching threat. He said nothing, but his stance was clear. He would not let them take her. The guards hesitated for only a second before firing, but Jack moved fast, pulling Sylphie through a side panel into a maintenance shaft as bolts of light seared past them. He didn't ask where to go, he just ran with her, following instinct over protocol, sliding down narrow tunnels, turning past emergency exits until they reached the docking bay, where his ship waited unattended under diplomatic privilege. They entered, breathless and bruised, alarms now blaring through the summit tower. Sylphie clutched his jacket, her entire body burning with energy she could not control. The heat inside her was rising again, not from fear, but from the nearness of him. And Jack, though exhausted, did not let go of her, not even for a moment. As he launched the ship into the stars outside, the Virellan warships began to shift position. Orders barked in ancient language, targeting the escaping human vessel, marked as a carrier of biological threat. But it was too late. Jack's ship vanished into hyperspace, its trajectory unknown even to the council inside the small ship. Sylphie sat on the floor, breathing heavily. She looked at Jack and whispered that she was sorry, not for escaping, not for touching him, but for dragging him into something that might destroy everything he knew. Jack knelt beside her, his hand brushing her shoulder, and he told her with quiet certainty that he would rather face the unknown with her than live safe without her. In that moment, something passed between them, not just heat, not just tension, but a recognition older than memory, as if two lost pieces had finally found their shape together. Escape to Earth. The ship dropped out of hyperspace with a violent shudder, stars swirling around them as the Earth appeared ahead, a small blue world surrounded by satellites and protected by defense grids. Jack's hands moved quickly across the console, bypassing security checks, using diplomatic overrides granted to him as part of the peace delegation. He sent a coded message to Earth Command identifying his passenger not as a threat, but as a life form in medical distress. They hesitated, but the override code was too high to deny, and the ship was cleared for emergency landing as they descended through the atmosphere. Sylphie leaned against the wall, her skin glowing faintly, her breath rapid, her body trembling in waves. She whispered that the heat inside her was growing stronger the closer they came to Earth. Jack knelt beside her, trying to cool her down with a field blanket, but the readings from the med scanner showed rising energy levels in her bloodstream. Her temperature exceeded safe virulent limits, her heart rhythm unstable. Her body was shifting. Adapting ship touched down at a private military site hidden deep in the mountains, and the moment the hatch opened, human scientists and medical officers rushed aboard, stunned at the sight of Sylphie, one of the most genetically controlled species in the galaxy, now in a visible state of biological emergency. She was carried carefully into a controlled isolation chamber, but unlike the Council, the humans did not treat her like a danger, they treated her like a mystery. They needed to understand of her. The next hour, scientists discovered that Sylphie was not sick, her body was entering a phase never documented before, a kind of imprinting triggered by exposure to a specific frequency of human male biochemistry. They theorized that millions of years ago, when human DNA was seeded across the stars, some latent code had been left behind in other races as a failsafe, a way for lost species to find their way back to the origin. Sylphie was not broken. She was responding to an ancient call, but the effect was intense. Her body required constant proximity to Jack, or her energy levels dropped dangerously. She tried to stay apart for his sake, but the moment he left the room, her system destabilized. She collapsed to the floor until he returned, and without words they both understood something permanent had begun. News of her landing leaked across the galactic network, and within hours a virulent fleet began moving toward Earth with one demand: surrender the anomaly or face war. The Council called it a breach of interspecies protocol. They claimed that Sylphie was a weapon disguised as a woman, a danger to the balance of galactic peace. Earth Command prepared defenses, but the political pressure mounted. Jack sat with Sylphie as the ultimatum countdown ticked away. He looked at her glowing eyes, her trembling hands, her voice soft with guilt and longing, and told her that no matter what happened, he would not let them take her back. He would protect her, even if it cost him everything. Sylphie reached out to him, and for the first time, without shame, without hesitation, she let her fingers touch his cheek. Her heat settled into a rhythm. Her mind cleared, and she whispered that if she had to burn, then she would rather burn beside him than live cold among her own. And far above them, the stars began to shift as the virulent warships crossed the threshold into Earth space, unaware that this time humanity would not bend. The truth of the ancient skies above Earth shimmered with tension as the virulent fleet hovered just outside the upper orbit. Their ships ranged like a blade against the stars, waiting for the final answer from Earth Command. Below the surface, inside a hidden research facility, Jack stood beside Sylphie as human scientists decoded a recently discovered archive. Hidden deep within the crust of Mars, the data had been dormant for thousands of years, but the moment Sylphie's biofield interacted with it, the system came alive. Ancient recordings and forgotten dialects began to speak of a time when humanity was not the youngest race, but the origin, when Earth was not a backwater planet, but a seed from which other species had been uplifted. The Virelin, the Serati, even the towering Glyvan had once shared common strands of dormant human code, and this code had been designed to activate under rare cosmic alignments or emotional triggers. Jack stared at the screen as the truth unraveled. Humanity had not just evolved on Earth. They had been spread as a foundation, a genetic key. Sylphie sat close to him, her hands clenched in her lap, her breath still heavy from the heat that burned through her. But now that heat made sense. It was not a flaw, it was a beacon. She had not fallen into madness. She had responded to a memory older than her civilization, a memory embedded in her very blood. The Council would never accept this truth. To admit that humanity was the source was to admit their own history was a lie. But the data could not be erased. The scientists transmitted it to neutral networks across the galaxy, and as races accessed the files, the galactic channels exploded with chaos. Some denounced it, others demanded more proof, but many began to question everything they had believed as debates roared through the stars. Sylphie's condition reached a critical point, her body glowing brighter, her voice now layered with harmonic tones. Her blood chemistry no longer matched Virelin norms. She was changing, evolving. Her connection to Jack had stabilized the transformation, but it had not stopped. It was still rising like a storm inside. Hirsch collapsed in the medical bay, her fingers reaching for Jack, and when he touched her, the room pulsed with raw energy readings. Spiked walls shook, and for a moment every device in the facility went dark. Then the lights returned, and Sylphie opened her eyes, calm, and focused, her voice smooth like wind over metal. She said she remembered something that had never been taught, a temple buried beneath the ruins of a forgotten moon, a place where the first humans had given their gift to the stars, a place where the answer to all this might still exist. She said the transformation she was undergoing was only the beginning, and Jack, now tied to her by more than instinct, had to come with her if the galaxy had any hope of understanding what came next. Outside, the virulent ships prepared for descent, preparing to breach Earth's defenses, unaware that the truth they feared was no longer hidden, and the two beings they hunted had already stepped beyond the limits of the old world. Love or war? The world stood still as Earth's orbital defense grid locked onto the incoming virulent fleet. Every missile, every laser, every satellite cannon charged with orders held in suspension, waiting for the final word from Earth Command. Deep beneath the surface in the mountain facility, Jack prepared Sylphie for departure. Their destination was the Forgotten Moon. She had spoken of the last possible place where answers might be found to explain not just her transformation, but the awakening of something long buried in human history. Sylphie's skin now shimmered with faint iridescence, her movements fluid like water, her voice calm but layered with strange resonance, as if two voices spoke at once. She had evolved beyond anything the scientists had ever seen, no longer just virulent, no longer just alien, but something new, something born from the intersection of two species that were never meant to meet, but always destined to. As Jack fastened the flight harness around her, he looked into her eyes and saw not just heat or tension, but a depth of connection that defied the logic of war. Outside, the alarm sounded again. The virulent flagship had launched a warning drone toward Earth's surface, and within moments it began to broadcast a message to all frequencies: "In the anomaly, or Earth will be purged." Demand echoed through every station, every outpost across the system. Panic surged, but so did something else. Anger, not at Sylphie, but at the arrogance of the Council, at the idea that one girl's biology was enough to justify extinction. Jack stood before the Earth Council and told them they had a choice: surrender and lose not only Sylphie, but the truth she carried, or fight for the right to exist without being controlled. He told them Sylphie was not a weapon but a bridge, and if the virulent feared that bridge, then maybe they were never truly allies at all. Vote was taken behind closed doors, and when it emerged, Earth had chosen to protect her. Within minutes, the sky lit up. Virulent ships descended, breaching the upper atmosphere, met by human warcraft in tight formations. The first shots were not fired by Earth, but by the fleet from above. Energy waves streaked the sky as the battle erupted. Sylphie and Jack launched in a stealth shuttle heading for the ancient moon, using the chaos as covers. The stars exploded with fire and metal. Sylphie sat in silence, her body trembling from within, not from fear, but from the pressure of something growing, something awakening. Her mind pulsed with visions of memories she had never lived, memories of worlds burning and voices calling out for help. Suddenly Jack cried out as the shuttle rocked, struck by a glancing blow from debris, a shard of metal piercing his side. He gritted his teeth and forced the ship forward, blood seeping from his wound. Sylphie turned to him, her voice breaking as she begged him to stay awake. She pressed her hands to his chest, and in that instant a surge of energy passed between them. Not like before, but stronger, her hands glowing brighter than ever. Jack gasped as warmth surged through his veins, the wound closing before their eyes, and Sylphie whispered that she had unlocked something deep within her blood, a gift given long ago by human ancestors, something that could heal, something that could protect, but only when given freely through true connection. But them Earth fought harder than ever, not because of fear, but because of belief that love, even when born between species, was not weakness but the only force left powerful enough to reshape the future. A new galactic wrath battle that had raged in the skies above Earth suddenly slowed as the virulent fleet realized the strength of the human defense was not just in weapons, but in willpower. Sylphie and Jack's shuttle pierced through the chaos and landed on the ancient moon. The surface was scarred with ruins and shadows of a time forgotten. Beneath layers of dust and silence they stepped out together, the air thin but breathable, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls of the temple. Inside, the temple walls were etched with symbols that pulsed faintly with energy. Sylphie's fingers traced the carvings, her voice soft as she read the ancient language, a story of creation and sacrifice, the gift of humanity, given to uplift and protect not just their own kind, but all life touched by their blood. The connection was sacred and rare, meant to awaken only in times of great need. As they reached the heart of the temple, a chamber opened, revealing a crystalline orb glowing with pure light. Sylphie reached toward it, and as her hand touched the surface, a wave of energy spread through the moon, shaking the ground, awakening dormant systems across the galaxy, signals firing from long silent stations, stars realigning, As if responding to a callback on Earth, the fighting paused as fleets across the system received the signal. Confusion mixed with hope spread among the alien races. Many stopped their assault to listen to the new message broadcasting from the temple. A message of unity, a call to remember the origins and to forge a future together. Sylphie's transformation completed her form, now a radiant blend of human and Virellan power glowing with light and strength. Jack stood beside her, his wound fully healed, his eyes filled with pride and love, their bond stronger than ever, a symbol of the new alliance born not from treaties or fear, but from understanding and connection. The Galactic Council was forced to acknowledge the change. The old ways could no longer hold the galaxy in chains. The humans were no longer just newcomers. They were the keepers of an ancient promise, a bridge between species, a force that could unite or destroy, but now chose to unite. Sylphie was appointed ambassador for the Virellan, and Jack for humanity. Their story became a legend told across star systems, a tale of how one look sparked a fire that changed the fate of many worlds. As they stood together on the moon's surface, watching the stars realign and new ships launching toward distant horizons, they knew this was only the beginning, the dawn of a new galactic era, where humans and aliens walked side by side as friends, lovers, and guardians of a shared future. Their journey had been born from heat and instinct, but it ended in something far greater: love, trust, and a promise that no matter the darkness ahead, they would face it together. United, a new galactic era. Complete war above Earth had finally quieted as ships from many worlds paused their fighting to listen to a message not of destruction but of hope. Sylphie and Jack stood together in the ancient temple, their hands joined as the light from the crystalline orb bathed them in warmth and power. The energy they released spread across the stars, awakening old alliances and healing long-forgotten wounds. The galaxy was changing, and it was because of them. Sylphie's transformation was complete. She was no longer just Virellan or human, but something new and beautiful, a living symbol of unity and strength. Jack looked at her with eyes full of pride and a love deeper than any words could say. Their bond was the key that opened doors to a future once thought impossible. Leaders across the galaxy sent messages of peace and curiosity. They no longer feared the unknown, but wanted to understand it. They saw humanity not as conquerors, but as guardians of a legacy that bound them all together. Sylphie and Jack became ambassadors, not just of their peoples, but of a new era where differences were celebrated and strength was found in connection. As they walked out of the temple onto the moon's surface, the stars above sparkled brighter, as if welcoming a dawn that would never fade. Their story was now a legend whispered on planets far and wide, inspiring hope and courage in hearts young and old. They had faced fear, hatred, and war, but through it all they had chosen love, trust, and unity. The galaxy was theirs to protect and to heal together, stronger and wiser than ever before. And in that moment, under endless skies, Sylphie whispered to Jack that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side, bound not by blood alone, but by something far greater, the promise of forever. Stars shone down on them as they stepped forward into a future where humanity and aliens stood united, ready to write a new chapter in the history of the cosmos. And